Okay. So first question. So thank you for your presentation. Do you do any research by type of subject a student is studying, or engineering, art, etc.? So basically, do you organize your research by subject area as well? Anybody?
I could probably go. My master's research was focused on undergraduate nursing students and their mental health. And so that's an area that obviously I have lived experience in, but also I think is important, because I think that there are very specific contextual things that need to be addressed as per different areas of work and study. But I know that most campuses who utilize the NCHA survey, for example, are able to break down their data by faculty. So if people were looking for more information on that and your campus does participate in that, you would be able to find that information from your faculty rep.
Thank you. Jenny, did you have any notes around different subject areas?
Yeah, I don't personally focalize a specific area, but I could picture my research going forward specifically to do with mental health practice. So counseling students, social work students, psychology students. I don't have that focus currently, but yeah, that's probably where I'm headed.
Wonderful, thank you. This next question is for you, Jenny, specifically. What are some ways in which university support staff can build or further their awareness of sociocultural norms in youth?
That is a great question. I think I want to return to what Kome brought up earlier, which is really to listen to the person in front of you and the youth who is in front of you, because these are ultimately the experts on their own lived experiences and what shapes their lives. So I think first and foremost, starting with the person in front of you, but also it is so important, in my opinion, to do your own homework before entering these spaces. And there's a lot that can go into that. There's a lot of social media out there these days, Instagram accounts, Twitters, academic Twitters, people who collate this information for you and can package it in very accessible ways. There are also many books coming out related to equity and to diversity and to inclusion. I don't have a book list on me currently, but I can create one. And I also think engaging in relationship with the people that have these identities and these experiences is such a wonderful way to be learning and in a very organic fashion. So I think defer to the experience of the people that you're with, form relationships that honor these people and their identities, and then do your homework by reading up on this and what's out there.
Absolutely, thank you. I have a question directly for Kome. You talked about gatekeeping in mental health research. I would love to hear your thoughts on how to further remove barriers and increase access to more students to see themselves as researchers and get involved.
That's a really good question. A lot of students, I find, their definition of what research looks like is something that we as a community need to be working on. I think people will feel like I have to be in a master's program or a PhD program, or what if my grades aren't high enough? And I think we need to normalize the fact that research isn't necessarily something that is formal all the time. We're typically engaging in research a lot of the time, we just don't know it, right? And I think also we have the standard that if it's not published, or if it's not in a particular journal, then it's not valuable research. But I feel like a lot of clinicians, for example, hold a lot of valuable research that is what can be termed as anecdotal, for example. And for me, I found that most of my anecdotal research findings help me to be a more effective clinician. And so I think being able to talk to students as early on as possible in their academic career about what research can look like you can practice doing research just in little projects. You can oversee or support a researcher that you find really interesting, and just kind of see what that process looks like. I think for a lot of students, it feels very overwhelming. I have to write this application. I have to find a supervisor. How am I going to find funding? Are they going to like me? How many people am I competing against? And I think if we can find ways to make that process less daunting for students, it would be really helpful. I know that finances is usually a big barrier, finding the funding to do research, lab space, who are we highlighting, who are we giving access to, where are we sharing this information about research opportunities? Is it just in an online thread where people don't really like read through, like, are you sharing it to diverse networks where people can see and sort of self opt in? I think we can also make it pretty clear that we're looking for diverse student researchers as well, knowing that their lived experience positively contributes to reducing things like bias, for example, like being able to have people in your lab who are able to see questions and say, actually, that question is not going to answer what we think it's going to answer, because a certain group of people are going to read that a certain way. I think being able to include factors like that in your recruitment shows students that you're thinking about how their lived experience positively contributes to the research process. And so I think our hiring processes need to be a lot more diverse and be a lot more equitable, I think, knowing that there are other ways for people to apply to access research and not just typical, like put in your application, email a prof, and wait for them to get back to you. So I would offer that. But I'm sure Jenny may also have some thoughts on that as well.
That was such a wonderful answer. You hit on everything that I would have wanted to share. So thank you, Kome.
You did. I think, important to highlight that people are doing research on a day-to-day basis, right? People are theorizing just as a byproduct of living. We are creating theory all the time, and people need to know that there are ways of living and being. The things that they're doing on a day-to-day basis is research to somebody, and it's important and it's valuable. And so, that it's around how we help people see themselves as valuable, as academic, as worthwhile, in terms of who they are and the power that they hold. Thank you. That was wonderful. There's a question for Jenny. You mentioned how family became more supportive and affirming over time for some youth. Do you have any insight on how this might happen, or how we could similarly promote greater acceptance, affirmation, or affirmation of the post-secondary context?
I think that's a great question. It's a very nuanced question. Off the bat, I think we meet the youth where they're at and determine, is this a priority for you? Is this safe for you? Is this feasible for you? Is it a goal for us to kind of promote affirmation and belonging in your family? Because I think it can really vary. And in the anecdote that was shared with me in my research, this person's family developed relationship and kinship with her girlfriend. And so over time, there was this greater acceptance and welcoming of her into their family because they developed a sense of kinship. And it was specifically during the COVID-19 context. So there were many stressors going on, and this person and her girlfriend really stepped up. So I think building relationships, it always comes down to building relationships. But if the youth considers it a priority, I know that there are actually caregiver trainings, actually hosted by a team based at U of T, the Faculty of Social Work. There is affirmative caregiver training if that is something the family would want to do. But I'm reluctant to give the very concretized steps without first determining what's possible for the youth in front of me, if that makes sense. And then in terms of promoting acceptance in post-secondary contexts, hosting more of these sessions, I think is a great start. And putting out more research, more stories about the people that we want to be affirmed, and to have that resilience perspective along with honoring the unique challenges that they face.
Thank you. Excellent. And the last question I have here, this person says, I work with graduate professional degree students. Much of the research seems to be undergraduate focused or graduate PhD academic track focused. What advice would you have for me when I'm trying to benchmark my students' responses or feedback against other students?
I'm trying to understand the question better in terms of when you're benchmarking, the difference between graduate professional students and our graduate PhD academic track. It's a very different lived experience, right? You're looking at people who may be in their second or third profession, who may have families and children. And so I'm wondering if your question is asking how you support theirs, like support them versus typically where the research is focused. If you can provide a bit of clarity, that would be helpful, just so we know how to best answer this question.
Does somebody want to add? I think it's Maria Rivera. Could you clarify the question, please? So I think Kome, we can send her a question and she can send a question and we can answer later. But I think that you really hit on the difference between the graduate professional degree students. Oh, here she is. She's trying to understand how important it is or not important it might be to distinguish professional graduate students' experience from undergrad.
Oh, I think it's really important. I know that there are gaps in support and resources. We tend to focus very heavily on our undergraduate population because we feel like they're younger and they're figuring it out. But also, I think it's important to know that professional graduate students are also figuring it out too, right? It's that context and not kind of allowing that one narrative that, you know, they're adults, they know what they're doing. People are reinventing themselves every day, and sometimes we miss people or people fall through the cracks because we just assume that they're doing okay. And so I think it's important to sort of allow their lived experience to speak for itself and not really compare them to the undergrads or even the academic track PhDs, and really seeking essentially what needs they have specifically, knowing that as a post-secondary community, we don't really do our best to provide niche support. Sometimes we tend to do as general as we can to catch everybody, but in catching everybody, we miss a lot of people as well. And so I know that the needs there are very unique in terms of just social supports, financial supports, sometimes even just needing more flexibility and adaptability in terms of how they seek supports or how they provide their work. And so I would say that it should probably be on a one-to-one basis versus trying to use like a general approach.
Absolutely. Yeah. There tends to be a focus on numbers and generalizability where, you know, that doesn't capture everybody and it's not necessarily the most effective, right? But again, that is the quantitative positivistic thrust of science and research. But they really thank you for highlighting that the individuality is important and capturing lived experiences are important. I think that is all for our questions. Thank you for those who came out to watch this. I'd like to really thank you, the speakers, Kome and Jenny. And I'm going to give it back to Kristin to I guess take us out.
Yeah, so I'll just echo what you said. Camisha, thank you both speakers. It was incredibly insightful, and I am excited, Jenny, to see what your doctoral studies are about, and Kome, to see what your next role and position that you're in, and it's wonderful to hear.